Okay, so this is my affirmative rebuttal. First, I would like to say that the negative side was done very well. Good job, Laura. And the debate process was a very fun learning experience. And I'll do my best here to make good on this affirmative rebuttal. So here we go. First of all, my opponent that is refuting my claims states first that the universal healthcare systems in place and in places like France have skyrocketed recently, which is true. But the skyrocketing of healthcare prices in the privatized healthcare system in the U.S. are much larger, and they account for a large percentage of the GDP, larger than any other country, which is a huge point to highlight. She even contradicts herself later in the argument by stating that healthcare costs are rising everywhere, making her first argument a double-edged sword in effect. My opponent also incorrectly suggests that I have declared the universal healthcare system and its implementation in the United States will fix everything about the healthcare system that we currently have. This is simply not true. I only contend that the universal healthcare system would be a better fit and not a fix or a solution or an end-all be-all to the problems that we currently have. Also, in regards to the argument made about individualism in the United States healthcare system, the universal healthcare systems in most of the countries that operate with these type of health structures allow for privatized health or the freedom of choice in your insurance provider if you do not want to be a part of the universal healthcare system. They still have the individuality and they still have the freedom of choice. This argument then crumbles under its own weight because there are still opportunities for individualism within the healthcare sector in countries that use universal healthcare systems and single-payer systems. Also, my true criterion for my debate possibly needed a little further clarification, but I believe in using and implementing a healthcare system that provides the best value and that is the most cost effective, not the one that simply saves the most money, as Laura indicated. Laura also points out that the World Health Organization takes into account the availability of coverage for all citizens of a country when grading the countries of the world, and that it penalized the U.S. because of, or penalized rather, universal healthcare systems for not having the same accessibility as a privatized healthcare system. Um, but there is um, the main point of this argument is to discuss the increase in availability of health care for all individuals. So that doesn't mean necessarily accessibility. Of course, we hope it does, but it means that there is coverage for more people instead of 45 million people in the United States currently being uninsured. I think my opponent starts to make a good point about the life expectancy statistic that we talked about in my affirmative piece. Life expectancy from birth is the statistic that we are focused on, which is directly related to the effectiveness of healthcare. I think my opponent does a good job making a following point to this argument in that universal healthcare systems are slower to catch up on medical innovation because of government intervention and involvement. That's a very strong argument. But I would also like to say that my opponent does touch on access to care, which is her strongest point against the change to universal health care in this discussion. However, I still believe that the broad range of coverage that is provided in a universal healthcare system that costs less per capita is extremely important as the gap between the have and the have-nots widens in America, with more people in the middle class unable to afford healthcare coverage than ever before. I believe my argument has more facts and more validity to why a universal healthcare system is needed in the United States.